Hi, this is Steve Broski with Sports America. We're going to do a quick run through of the group registration site and the group administrative side of the system following to demonstrate some of the features and functionalities that we can offer our ski groups. I would note that this is not a tutorial, just a quick demonstration of some of the features. And before we begin, I'd like to apologize if this video comes off as choppy. Video editing is not my forte, and what you see here is actually going to be a combination of many clips spliced together, so certain sections might sound a little unnatural. Here we're looking at a sample registration site. The text that's usually used to describe the trip to consumers and guide them through the process is instead being used to demonstrate the functionality to you, the trip leader. And we've added a yellow background to identify which parts of the page can be customized and which are built-in portions of the page common to all our sites. I would note that the look and feel of the page reflects our old website design. We've recently changed our site's design to something a bit more modern, and the group registration page's look will change to match soon. It's currently April 2014, and I expect these cosmetic changes by May or June, but the functionality will remain the same. The website address follows the format sportsamerica.com/online/yourcode. In this case, we've used the keyword demo, but for your trip, it may be sportsamerica.com/online/XYZ Ski Club, or really anything you want. The top of the page provides the group name, trip, and details, and even the sign itself can be changed. For example, here is a trip for the Gator Snow Ski Club, and one done for the Crescent Ski Council. As I mentioned, the look of these registration pages is going to change, but we're going to ensure we can customize some of the graphic features just to add a nice touch to each group's trip. When the guest has reached the bottom of the page, all choices that affect the trip price have been decided. The guest then decides which payment option they would like, check or credit card, and continues on to the second page. Once again, depending on the group's needs, the payment choice may not be offered, and the guest will simply see their trip price and the button to continue on. The right sidebar shows the trip pricing, Sports America representative, and club representatives. On the demo site here, we've chosen to show just about everything. Check and credit card options, including a cash discount price, and all the representatives. This is similar to how we might set up a site where Sports America is actually collecting payments from the consumers. For other groups, their needs may be different, and this might be scaled back, showing only the base price and only group representatives. Now we'll walk through a quick sample registration. Trip registration is a two-page process. The first page, guests make all selections that affect pricing. The second page, guests provide personal information and any selections that do not alter the price. In this particular format, guests register one at a time. After the first guest is registered, they have the option to add another guest who will be linked to them in our database, so that they are shown together. Guests make their selections for the various trip components: lodging, lift tickets, airfare, etc. The sidebar with the pricing stays fixed and static on the side, and the pricing changes in real time as the trip selections are made. And at the bottom of page 1, the option to add trip insurance is provided. This particular option can be toggled on or off depending on each group's needs. Some groups like the option for guests to choose trip insurance, some provide it on their own, in which case we do not make this offering. When the guest has reached the bottom of the page, all choices that affect the trip price have been decided. The guest then decides which payment option they would like, check or credit card, and continues on to the second page. Once again, depending on the group's needs, the payment choice may not be offered, and the guest will simply see their trip price and the button to continue on. On page 2, guests are asked to provide their personal information. Many of these fields can be turned on or off depending on a group's needs. Things like a nickname for name tags or credentials, club membership number, and the guest's age. Some groups like this information, some groups find it is unnecessary. If we're issuing airline tickets for a group, we make sure to collect the guest's legal name and birthday for TSA purposes. At the end of page 2, selections that do not affect trip price are requested from the guest. Things such as activities, which are yes or no answers, and can affect price in some cases. On the demo site, we offered a Copper Mountain Ski Day add-on for $65. That activity was shown on page 1 because it affected the trip price. Up to 9 package options can be included as well. Options are either drop-down selections, in this example t-shirt size, or type-in selections. In this case, we are asking the participants what destination they might be interested in going to next year, to just be a reference for the trip leaders. After the options and activities, a custom payment policy information can be provided, cancellation terms, and general terms and conditions. If terms and conditions are included, the guest is asked to digitally sign the registration form, and their signature is stored in our database. When everything has been entered, the guest simply clicks the button to complete their registration. The guest is taken to their profile page and will also receive a confirmation email at that time. From the profile page, guests can add more guests that will be linked to them. If they chose to pay by credit card and that was an option available to them, they would fill out a credit card authorization. This goes through the payment policy and cancellation terms once again, and collects another digital signature for Sports America's records when processing their credit card. On the guest's profile page, they are able to change any of their entries, change their selections subject to inventory and locking mechanisms that we will describe later in this video, and general information from the trip leader can be included up here as well. And that is a quick overview of the trip registration process from the consumer's view. One other thing I quickly want to note, I showed you the format that tends to work where mostly individuals sign up, or perhaps the occasional couple. There is an alternate mechanism available that's better suited for groups signing up together. Parties of 3 to 5 who may be picking a specific unit to all stay together. And I'm going to show that to you real briefly right now. When set to the alternate format, much of the information shown is identical, however the way the registration process works differs. Guests are asked to add all names first, obviously Mike's birthday is not in 2007, but for demonstration purposes this works fine. And then the guest is asked to add or make their lodging selections and continue on to the next step where they'll make the rest of their choices. But again, we're using the same package options here and same descriptive text. It's just offered in a slightly different format that works better when the bulk of a group will be signing up as families or collective groups. And as you can see here, the packages for all 3 guests are reflected and shown as a combined total. The remainder of this registration process is identical to the first version shown, so we'll stop at this point. And that completes the demonstration of online registration from the consumer's view. Next, we're going to head into the administrative side of the database to show how you, the trip leader, can efficiently manage your group. Now we'll take a look at the trip leader's administrative site. You'll log in with the username and password assigned by Sports America. And this is your trip details. In addition to the sample registration we just completed, where I added myself, I've added 48 fake names for this trip, giving us a total of 49 guests. The welcome page includes a graph that shows the number of guests who registered each day, and that's reflected in the blue bars. So on March 19th, 4 people registered. On March 20th, 5 people registered. And a cumulative total of trip attendees via the red line. So on March 28th, there were 28 people registered on the trip. On April 14th, there were 45 people registered. Some trip leaders like this tool to look at prior years to see the year-over-year differences in terms of how many people are registering for their trip and how quickly. Trip leaders also have the option to request a daily email report. Once a day, they will receive an email with the names of all guests who registered that day. The remainder of this page has trip information and the trip leader contact information. There can be multiple trip leaders assigned, and we can set on a per trip leader basis whether their information will display on the registration page or not. The tabs up top show the various components of the trip, and we'll take a quick look at the Guests tab first. All guests who have registered for the trip appear on this page. You can click on their name and see their trip details. I've added fake names, but I did not add fake addresses and birthdays and ages and such. That's why this one looks a little bit blank. You can also quickly search for any guest by starting to type their name up top here and get directly to that guest. On this page, you can make any edits to the guest that you need. We'll add a nickname here. And you can change their package selections if you want to do it directly, if the guest has chosen not to do it via their profile page. Here we'll take away the Copper Mountain ski day that I had added when I registered for the trip. And the trip price reflects that change. All revisions are recorded and audited, and this is a little hard for trip leaders to decipher, but if there's a question as to what happened to a guest, Sports America can tell you exactly when the change occurred and by whom. Next, we'll look at the Lodging tab. This includes the units that appear on the trip registration page, as well as the individual units where we can assign guests. I'll explain this a little bit better towards the end of the video when we show the trip registration options. From this page, we can assign guests to a particular unit just by double-clicking on their name, or remove them from the unit by double-clicking their name. We can also go into that specific unit to see more details about that particular condo or hotel room, and this also provides a timeline view that shows when guests were added to the unit and when guests were removed from the unit. Once again, just leaving a convenient audit trail for trip leaders to see when changes occurred. The lift ticket, airfare, and ground transportation tabs function identically to the Lodging tab. We can see which guests are assigned to it. We can assign guests to it. In this case, everybody has been assigned to this trip, so we can remove some. And we can assign guests to the other options if we need. Again, in most cases, the guests will be making these decisions for themselves, but you as the trip leader do have the option to manually take control of the guest selections. The Activity tab displays all activities you have requested Sports America set up for your group. Activities are yes or no selections, and so you can see which guests have opted for yes on any particular request. And again, the same timeline trail shows when people were added to it and when people were removed from that selection. The Options tab shows any options you might have requested Sports America set up. Options are selections that can be answered by the guest either via a drop-down menu of choices or if they typed in a specific entry. And finally, the Finances tab shows each guest their trip price, and if we have received any payments direct from the guest, that information. We can see here we've set Peter Jacobson as having sent $345 in. That appears on his profile, recording that entry. And finally, we'll look at the club reports. Room lists, lift ticket orders, air travel. All this information is available to you in a convenient report. And every report has the option to export it to Microsoft Excel as well. And that is a quick overview of the administrative tools trip leaders have when working with Sports America's group registration system. And finally, we wanted to show a quick overview of the fine-tuning we can do to the trip registration process. Each trip is different, and we put a lot of effort into maximizing the flexibility of our system in order to meet each group's needs. I'm now logged in as a Sports America administrator, which opens up a few new options, including the Online tab. The Online tab is where we customize the trip registration process. We can set the maximum number of guests allowed to register for the trip. Currently we have 49 guests registered, so if I set the max to 40 and we go back to the trip registration page and refresh, you can see it's now sold out, and regardless of their choice, they do not have the ability to continue. And now they can register once again. We can turn on and off nearly all portions of the registration site. Here I'll disable the Sports America rep from displaying in the sidebar, and I'll disable the ability for the guest to choose their lodging. So now if we go back to the registration site and refresh, you can see Sports America's representative no longer shows here, and the lodging selection has been removed. You, as the trip leader, still have the ability to set the lodging from the admin system, but we've removed the option from the guest to make that choice. These are somewhat fringe cases where these are needed, but it's just to demonstrate the amount of flexibility that we've built into this system. And we're going to set this back to where it was before. The text write-up section is where we can put custom text across the registration site. So for instance, if we look at the roommate preferences tab and we add roommate selection is not guaranteed, and then we go back to our registration site and down to the roommate request, you can see that text has been added. And let's clean that up. The alternate text is somewhat uncommon in the case where we do council trips where multiple clubs are registering under the same trip. These options allow us to override the write-ups for all trips. So if a specific club has some specific text they want included for their site only, we can add that here. The remaining tabs are the actual trip components that the consumer sees on the registration site. In the lodging tab here, you can see all of our lodging choices that we have in our lodging section are displayed, but only these two choices are set to show online. This is the most common approach we use, where guests are able to register for what we call a placeholder unit, but they do not choose their actual units. Guests register online, fall into one of these placeholder units, and then are later moved into the actual condos. To give a quick example, we'll add a couple units to the online registration site, and if we head back to register, you can see their selection options are much more. In most cases, guests aren't picking a specific unit, they're just picking a style of unit. That's why we do it the way that we're doing here. For each selection, we can further customize the notes that the guests see. So for the quad occupancy lodging selection, add a quick little note, and if we go back to the registration site, you can see what we've added is there. We can also set a max inventory. Currently I have 6 or 7 people assigned to this choice, so if we say a maximum of 4 are allowed, we'll go back to the registration to see this selection is not available. This would be commonly used for things like airfare, where you've booked a certain number of seats and we can't necessarily go over that number without contacting the airline and trying to get more. The guest lock is a date we can set at which guests can no longer make changes to that choice. So if I set a date for April 1st, which is in the past, and go back to my trip profile page that the consumer would see, previously I was able to change my choice at a refresh. I am no longer to make that change. This allows us to fine-tune when guests can make changes. In some instances, we might allow a guest to change their lift ticket choice, up to perhaps 3 weeks before the trip, but their airfare selection we might have to lock down at 6 weeks before the trip. It just gives us a further degree of customization available. The leader lock is similar. This is the point at which you as the trip leader can no longer make changes, and only Sports America can. For instance, if we have ticketed the airline tickets or turned in a lift ticket order, we would set that date and disable you, the trip leader, from being able to make those changes without contacting us first, so that we're able to talk to the suppliers and make the changes that are needed. And the final option we have available in terms of customizing when guests can make changes is what we call the add lock. If a component is set to an add lock, that means upon registration that choice is available for them to register, but they are no longer able to register or to change that selection once they've chosen it. The most frequent use of this is when booking airline seats. We had some trip leaders who had blocks of airfare. They were selling the trip and guests were registering for the air, and then suddenly the guests were changing to a no airfare option without the trip leader's knowledge. So we added this functionality to give guests the ability to select airfare, but not necessarily change that choice later on and surprise the trip leader. The remaining tabs, lift ticket, air, ground, are similar to the lodging choice. Again, within the system we can have multiple lift ticket choices, but perhaps we only display 2 of them as selections online. This is somewhat common, where a trip leader says, well, I'd like a no lift ticket option available, but I don't necessarily want to promote that fact, more on an on-request basis. So we can set the registration site to only show the 2 lift ticket choices to the consumer, but the trip leader or Sports America can give a 3rd choice if the consumer requests it. And that is a quick overview of our group registration site. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch it. And if you have any questions about how things work, what functionality might be available to meet your group's needs, please feel free to contact us. You can talk to your Sports America rep, or you can contact me directly. I'm actually the programmer who built this, and I can be reached at steve@sportsamerica.com. Thank you very much.